They have a combined 12 years in the National Football League. They combined for 65 career sacks, 232 tackles, 1 Pro Bowl selection, and 1 Employee of the Month award.
That's just a straight shooter with upper management written all over him.
It's Train and Grose on the All AZ Podcast Network.
Welcome in, Train and Grose, episode 89. Hey, back like we never left. B-Train, Bertrand Berry, Mike Grose, and Sean Crespin coming to you this evening from train station in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona. And we were kind of gone for a little while, a little bit of a hiatus, but it's great to be back. Good to see you, fellas.
Reunited, and it feels so good.
No doubt.
Shout out to Peaches and Herb.
No doubt.
I mean, it's just, that's one of those good songs that just gives you good vibes. You guys give me good vibes, man.
Good vibes.
Last day of November, by the way.
Can't believe it. It's about ready for us to take our annual Christmas picture.
Yeah.
It is.
How about that?
Lights up yet?
No.
Yes.
Really?
Okay, when?
The day after Thanksgiving.
Okay, good. You're safe. That's good. That's fine. Me, no, as well. I don't know if I'm going to get them up this year at all.
Yeah.
I'll be perfectly honest.
I'm with you.
Yeah. I don't think
My
I'm gonna
lights
get
are
up at all.
old, though. To be fair, my lights are old. I need a complete
Mine too.
overhaul of all of my Christmas stuff, tree and everything. Because, you
Yeah.
know, I got the fake tree. I don't do the real tree.
We don't do the real tree either. Dude, we were at, I won't name the place where we were. We were out doing some shopping, and it was a big tree now, but it was, I mean, it wasn't all that. It was $799.
Stop it.
For a Christmas tree.
No. That's a hard no.
For in Arizona, and it'll be dead in 2 weeks anyways because it's hot and dry here.
Oh, it was a real tree?
Real tree.
Oh, no.
Now, I will say this, coming from Michigan, it was nice walking through the tree lot, smelling the
pine.
Yeah,
freshly
I'll
cut
give you
trees.
that.
Yeah. But our first year living here, we put a real tree in our place. Yeah, we're
Yeah,
lucky
you got to keep that thing
didn't burn
wet.
the thing down.
Right.
Like, not even at the bottom, like the tray at the bottom to fill it up. Like, you got to hose it off, like, because it is so dry.
Yeah.
It's probably a hot winter there. So, artificial tree all the way. But our lights are up. Meg came home for Thanksgiving.
Oh, nice.
She had several things that were on her list. Number one, she is definitely into the decorating. So she helped do the decorating. In fact, I'll give her credit for help driving the decorating. Obviously, Thanksgiving dinner.
Wow.
And number two, she wanted to go see number three, go see B-Train. So she check.
I mean, I was so happy to see you guys when I was walking to the stands.
We didn't tell you we were coming. We
Didn't tell
surprised
me.
you. Surprised
I mean, the surprise was perfect. It was flawless. Got to see 2 familiar faces. I
Yep.
mean, I'm all intense, like, you know, I'm focused on
Game
the game.
day?
Yeah, it's game day. I'm locked in. You know, I want to tape my fingers. You know what I mean? Like, I want to go old school on them, but. Then I see Mike and Meg, and I'm like, oh, man, come on. This is great. This is family reunion.
It was
time.
family reunion, and your lovely wife and daughter saw us first, and I had my back to the walk-up, and Shelly, your wife, saw Meg, and she's like, I know you, and Meg's like,
That's right.
and finally Meg put 2 and 2 together when she saw your
That's
daughters.
right.
So
That's right.
But
That's
it was great to see everybody go out. High school football, playoff football here in Arizona. It's a great time of year.
Semifinals.
Before
All
we
the
do
way around.
sports, this is Train and Gross, and we do like to talk sports. But I got to do this. I was watching part of. I didn't see the whole thing because I tripped on it late on HBO. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction,
Wow.
and there's a couple names that struck me.
Okay.
Number one, Pat Benatar, and
Wow.
the reason we bring her up is because Christine McVie from Fleetwood Mac passed away, and she was 79 years old.
God rest her
Great
soul.
career.
Yeah.
Great career.
Great voice.
Great voice. But Pat Benatar and her husband were inducted. And she performed live at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I don't know how old she is. I believe I read she was 70.
Wow.
Pat Benatar can still bring it. I wasn't necessarily a huge fan of hers growing up
Right.
because she's in my wheelhouse. She is 70s and 80s.
Right.
And growing up, I remember in Detroit, WRIF.
Yeah, punk rock, you know,
Yeah.
the spike haired and the makeup.
thing.
Yeah, all that. Yeah.
And she still looked young enough.
Okay.
But when she started singing at age 70,
The voice is still there.
still there.
Okay.
Like you didn't need to see her. You heard it. You knew who it was.
She had the golden pipes.
She can bring it.
Okay.
And then the other one, they didn't perform or they didn't have anything to do with it, but 2 guys that I grew up because this is going to be sharing too much information in about a second. Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis were inducted.
I mean, come on.
Their speech was given by
Janet Jackson.
Janet Jackson.
Of course
Nice.
it was.
And
It better been done by Janet Jackson. She owes her whole career to Jimmy Jam. Taylor
and
Lewis.
half the time was there.
Wow. Was Morris there?
I didn't see Morris. I saw Jerome, though.
Jerome,
Bring
did
me
he have
my
the mirror?
And this is where it was going to be too much information, and I will not do it but back in the day, I think I might have told you this one time, but back in the day, I could do the walk. Not the actual walk. I knew the entire song.
Wow.
I knew the entire song.
Fellas, yeah, have you heard? It's a brand new dance.
About to walk a home my Stacey Adams. What time is it?
You don't need no finesse.
So there you go. So Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, and they were wearing their all black trademark.
The fedora.
And the sunglasses.
That's for sunglasses.
Absolutely. They looked like older versions. Talk about everybody getting older. They looked exactly like you would expect Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis to look like in 2022.
What's your favorite Jimmy Jam, Terry Lewis produced song?
I can't give you one because
the
list is so long. They listed all the artists that they work with.
Yeah.
And I'm like, damn, they did that?
Yeah.
They did that?
Yeah.
I can't give it to you. But what made them because they didn't produce the time. They were in the time.
Right.
They were
part of the group.
They were them.
Yeah.
They obviously
they were the time. Morris Day in the time. They were them.
No disrespect to Morris Day or Jerome.
They were the ones.
They were the time.
Yes, they were the time.
But some of that Janet Jackson stuff.
I am looking at the whole list of everything they've written. It's forever long, by the way. But yeah, Janet, everything, all of the hits that made her who she is in the early days.
Jimmy Jam, Terry Lewis,
yeah,
without question.
All of them.
But I'm gonna go a little left. I'm gonna go New Edition.
Okay, I like where you're going.
I'm gonna go Can You Stand the Rain?
Mm-hmm. Great track.
Yeah,
that's one of my favorite Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis's because I mean it's one of those they still play it in movies today. And like if you were to put that on. If you put that in a group of 40 to 50-year-olds, they're you know how like when you hear your song and everybody's like, oh man, that's my song right there.
Yep.
They lose their mind. That's one of those songs that people will and everybody will start to do some sort of choreography as far as the dance is concerned.
Man, all the 80s Janet.
Great stuff.
So good.
Great stuff.
And some of the other, and I don't have it in front of me, like you would not even know. And I'm trying to remember what the name of this band was. They were from Europe. England, UK.
Human League?
The Human League, thank you. The Human League. Like, what?
Yeah. Yeah, man. They were one of, you didn't have a hit in the 80s unless you dealt with Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis on some degree.
Oh, how about, you went a little bit left. How about Johnny Gill? Rub You the Right Way.
I mean, take your pick.
What a track. That's a great track.
Again, New Edition. You go back to Ralph Tresvant, all those guys, Bobby Brown, all of his albums. I mean, we could do a whole show on just Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. That's how far their reach is when it comes to music.
And then the last one that we could talk about here, we could, like you said, we could do a whole thing.
Absolutely.
And I think you and I talked about this too. The Defiant Ones, Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine.
Absolutely.
Jimmy was put in last night. And you talk about the acts, the talent that he produced,
the reach,
found.
Yeah, the reach.
Unbelievable.
I mean, you got to give him credit just for Beats headphones, just his influence on the Beats headphones. Like everybody gives Dr. Dre the credit for it, but it was a collaborative effort between he and Dr. Dre, and just that alone, that changed everything. Now, every athlete for a good stretch there in the 20 teens. Nobody was coming off the bus unless they had on some Beats headphones. Beats by Dre.
And they sold them off to Apple for $1 billion.
A bill. Easy.
I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah.
But the ones he had, Mary J. Blige was sitting in the front row, and he was thanking her.
Right.
And she's like, and she almost started crying. Just listen for him thanking her.
Yeah. I mean,
unbelievable. And the other thing and then I'll stop.
By the way, the list is still going. I'm still scrolling.
Right? We'll get to Jimmy Iovine next. Bruce Springsteen inducted him.
Wow.
And he talked about how that song, I can't remember the name of it, that he gave to Patti Smith. Like
Color Me Bad.
Bruce Springsteen had a song that he wasn't using. He said, "Can I have that song?"
Wow.
And Bruce was like, "What are you going to do with it?" He goes, I'm going to give it to Patti Smith. We're going to make a hit. And he's like, "No, you won't." He gave it to him. It was a number 5 record.
Wow.
So crazy.
Yeah.
I recommend it if you come across the induction. Because the other thing, Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis and Jimmy Iovine especially, the other thing that I'm struck by when you think about what these men have done professionally and the acts and let's be honest, the money that's behind all of that, whether it's the beats or whatever, how humble they both were, Jimmy Jam, and they were
all about the business.
At the end, Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis said, here's our business contract. I met this man in 1973, and it's a 50-50 collaboration. He goes, you want to see how we sealed the deal? They shook hands and walked off the stage.
It doesn't get any better than that.
I mean,
it doesn't get any better than that.
You know, it's 2022, and they're talking about what they did in 1973.
Learn lessons, youngins.
Learn lessons.
Learn lessons.
Well put. Well put. All right. Well, we avoided it long enough.
We got to talk sports.
We got to talk sports. That's what we get paid the big bucks for here. And I guess we start because we have to with the NFL, the local team. And I'm going to recap in case people have missed it. They suck. And at some point, B-Train, you said at some point we'll know who you are. Well, that's clear with this team, who you are, you know. And I'm going to say a couple things, and we'll get deep into it. And you tell me if I'm right.
Okay.
I actually think the defense and some of the players on the defense we were a little hard on, and I think they're beyond where I thought they would be. I want to talk about guys like Isaiah Simmons, Zaven Collins. You know, again, these are guys we were very down on when we were talking in the summertime.
Yep.
And I think, you know, all things considered.
J.J. Watt.
You know, J.J. Watt, all things considered, you know, a little bit better than I expected out of this group. In other words, if you want to go ahead and tell me what's wrong with the Arizona Cardinals.
They're not it.
You're not going to start with the defense.
No, you're not.
The secondary even, I think, playing better.
Buddha is the heart and soul of the team.
Without question. Without question. And J.J. Watt, I don't know if this is fair or not, but he's earning his paycheck. Like, you know, you look at what I mean, I know he's paid a lot for his age, but, you know, he's not mailing it in ever.
Yeah, Zach Allen.
Zach Allen, I think, future very
going
bright.
Above what expectations are.
And to see the interaction with him and JJ.
Yep.
This offense, though, man. And look,
it's rough.
And I want you to share this because this is yours. But you know, the scheme that they're running, the execution, the assemblage of talent. I mean, come on, like, you know, it's real, but there's just something wrong here. And I understand people are down on Cliff, and we were talking about this before we started recording, and I am not defending Cliff Kingsbury with what I'm about ready to say.
Yep.
But he's not the only problem with this franchise.
No, he's not.
He's not the problem.
No.
This offensive line
decimated, though.
It's decimated by
4 of the 5 that were projected starters were not on the game.
Understood.
Yep.
But where's the back in the day when we had a different head coach and a different mentality around this team? You had next man up. And if anybody's surprised that Rodney Hudson's been AWOL most of the year, you ain't paying attention. And I'm sorry, like Billy Price, center, Billy Price,
something like that.
Yeah,
but not Rodney Hudson.
As I watched, how does your center lead the team in false start penalties? Snapping the ball.
We've seen this before. We saw that act before with the center.
My goodness.
So it's not like that was something that was completely out in left field, because there was a player, to be named nameless, a few years ago who had the same problem.
Yeah.
And you know, when you are the center, you are the one that has the ball in your hand as much as the quarterback. So if you're the one false starting, it really does speak to a bigger problem.
Yeah.
Of what's going on.
You got the Eno Benjamin situation that I don't know that we ever got clarity on that. I mean, you can read between the lines and maybe figure out what happened. You've fired or put on suspension 2 of your offensive coaches since the start of the season.
Yeah.
You know, you had the situation with the running backs coach in Ohio that the media found out. The team wasn't aware. Once they found out, they put him on. I don't know if they've officially terminated him yet or not. Yeah. And then you have a coach playing grab ass in Mexico City while you got all this other stuff going on, and you got to send him home like you don't have enough other distractions going on, right?
Mike, it's a mess.
It's an unmitigated disaster.
It's a mess. And the thing about it is, I saw it coming. If you guys remember, we talked about the Pro Football Focus and one of those publications had them at 14 and 3.
I think you and I were laughing. We were going through that first
the ESPN
2
computer.
months. That's what it was. It was the ESPN computer.
14 and 3 or 15 and 2, something crazy. I'm like, are you serious right now?
Stupid computer.
Yeah. But I mean, the assembly of talent, the semblance of talent on this roster right now, it doesn't mesh, especially on the offensive side. We saw in the game against the Los Angeles Chargers, You finally had DeAndre Hopkins and you finally had Hollywood Brown together on the field at the same time. Mm-hmm. You still had injuries. You still, Rondell Moore is out. Dortch is out. You don't have much behind those guys. Zach Ertz is out. And it's like you take a step forward, but you take 2 steps back. And looking at this team, there are certain aspects of it that's like, okay, the names sound really good. When you start looking at the roster, it's like, man, okay, that's a name. Okay, that's a name I recognize. I recognize that name. Okay, this is going to be a pretty good team. But then when you actually see them go out and compete with one another, it doesn't mesh.
Yeah,
it really doesn't.
What do you make of the quarterback in not exactly saying it, but calling out the head coach / play caller the way he did with the schematically we're blanked comment right after the game this week?
No, he didn't mix his words. I mean, he said they're effed.
Yeah.
So he couldn't have said it any simpler than what he did.
What do you make of that? I mean, because again, if that is the case, in my opinion, in being somebody who sat in all those press conferences and always wanted guys to be open to me, ultimately I know that there's a whole lot of things that don't need to be said to the media. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That can need go into Cliff's office, blow up the locker room after the game, but to do it at the press conference, at the media, when we're sitting there knowing damn well what the conversation's going to be as soon as those words leave your mouth, what do you make of that? I mean, it's supposed to be the leader that's supposed to be avoiding those kind of situations and questions that the coach now has to answer and everything else. What do you make of it as a player?
So, one, consider the source.
Okay.
Nobody has ever mistaken Kyler Murray for being a mature leader.
Yep.
That's one.
Yep.
Number 2, it also says that Kyler Murray has the freedom mentally and emotionally to say whatever he wants to say. Think about that. Not a lot of guys in a locker room have that kind of cachet to say whatever they want to say, especially the way that he said it, because he could have dressed that up a little bit. He chose not to, and he was very matter of fact. Like I'm looking at his face real time when he gave that clip, that sound bite, and it was like, oh yeah, schematically we're and he just, okay, what's the next question? When you say it like that, that means you've been thinking this for a long time.
Right.
That's been on your mind to say for quite some time.
And do those thoughts need to go to the podium to talk to guys like us who sit there at these press conferences looking for stories and angles and conversations for the rest of the week? Does it need to be at the podium, or is that something that's in the locker room? Like, Cliff, we're blanked right now. What the hell are we doing? You know what I mean? Like, does it need to go to the podium?
I think for him, and here's the rub when it comes to media and players. Media always wants guys to be honest and open. The minute that they are honest and open,
blast them for it.
There you go.
Whoa, wait. Are you sure you want to say that?
Right.
Because
you can't have it both ways.
That's been the knock on Kyler since pretty much he got here. He doesn't give you anything.
See, and I don't think the media is blasting Kyler for saying it, because, again, you're 100% right. We all go, well, there's my storyline for the entire week. Yeah. Thank God.
Right.
But if you're the coaches in that locker room, if you're Cliff, I mean, hell, if you're some offensive players who are now going to be asked that same question when you're the next one at the podium, are you going, dude, why are you saying that at the press conference?
But you know what that means, though, first and foremost? It means that change is coming.
Yeah.
That's what that
100%.
means. That means change is coming. That means he knows change is coming.
Dead man walking.
Can I play for you? And I want to get your thoughts on this, too.
Go for it.
As somebody who was in the league as long as you were, what protocol is when you're a current NFL player to call out another current NFL player. Patrick Peterson, today on his podcast, we're recording this again on Wednesday the 30th, okay? His
Last day of November.
The All Things Covered podcast. I want you to listen to what he had to say when this conversation was brought up about the comments about Cliff Kingsbury. Here's what Patrick Peterson had to say today on his podcast.
Verbally now, vocally, Kyler Murray is talking about, and I don't like how he's doing that. I think he should keep some things privately, but it tells me he doesn't care about his head coach. And he's putting everything on the head coach, basically saying
Kyler Murray don't care about nobody but Kyler Murray. That's just a matter of the fact.
I gotta. I can't argue. I don't know him personally. You played with him for a few years, so I got to take your word for it.
I mean, what do you want me to add to that? I mean, that's as plain as it could be.
Yeah, that's Patrick Peterson on the All Things Covered podcast.
One, he has no fear of any reprimand.
Yep.
Because he's not going to be reprimanded by anybody. Not the head coach, not the general manager, not the owner. And when you have that type of situation and you have a guy that's a younger guy and has been displaying personality that he's displayed in his first 4 years here, it lends itself to say, well, what did you expect?
Yeah, he was coddled,
What did you expect?
Yeah.
This is the culmination of a guy that has been given everything that he wants, when he wanted it, how he wanted it, and he has total free reign to do whatever. It kind of reminds me of Aaron Rodgers right now out in Green Bay. Some of the things that he's saying, some of the things that he's doing. Oh, I want to play. If I feel good, I'm going to play. It's my decision.
And franchise in general in this league now, franchise quarterbacks, you're going to see more of that.
When
and
you
not
get
less.
that, when you get that contract, it kind of almost lends. That.
But he displayed these characteristics before he got the money. He was doing this his first year. He was doing this his second year.
And that's when Patrick played with him. Is it odd that a current player calling out another current player?
No, he has cachet.
Yeah.
Patrick Peterson clearly still feels some sort of way about the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah, constantly.
So I'm going to take
Right.
what he said with a grain of salt because you aren't going to hear him do anything to take any heat off of Steve Keim, especially, and this franchise, because he still feels a certain way about how he was let go. Just like he said, and he didn't do it, he was going to get 2 interceptions against the Cardinals, and I think it was on the exact same podcast. So whatever else happens, we know there's not going to be a change of quarterback, but what about the front office? What about the head coach? We'll get into that next on Train and Grose.
Train and Grose.
They're so bad we got to give them 2 segments. But I think it's a legitimate concern here. If you're close to this team, if you follow this team,
The Cardinals.
what their changes have to happen.
Change is coming. Hold on, change is coming.
And as I said earlier, whatever I'm saying is not a defense of the head coach, but he's not the only problem. I don't understand how the general manager can come back if you let the coach go. I do not understand it.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where he's responsible because this coach has absolutely no control over anything other than the game. He doesn't. I don't even think he hired his staff. I don't think. I know for a fact he has no player personnel decision responsibilities. So this is a joint effort.
So let's talk about that, Mike. So when you start talking about the fact that he doesn't have these hats to wear, if you're looking for your replacement for a Cliff Kingsbury, a lot of people are talking about Sean Payton.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Sean Payton is the complete opposite of what we know Cliff Kingsbury to be.
Yep.
He's very much hands-on when it comes to personnel. He's very much hands-on in operation and how things are run on a day in and day out basis. If you are Michael Bidwill, are you willing to give your franchise over to Sean Payton and say, hey, look, you go and do it? Because Sean Payton came from the tree of one Bill Parcells, a guy that was very much hands-on and gave the infamous quote, if you're going to make me cook the meal, you should at least let me shop for the groceries.
Yeah.
Right? So he comes from that mentality, and we saw that in New Orleans, and it worked to win a Super Bowl. Now, he also had an all-time great in Drew Brees to go along with him, and so he had a lot of cachet in that organization because they didn't do a whole lot of winning before both of those guys showed up. So the fact that they were able to do it, and the Bensons were pretty much willing to let them do what they needed to do and make them look good, will Mike Bidwill be able to do that? Will he be able to swallow his pride and allow Sean Payton to do what he needs to do in order to get this thing turned around?
I'm going to say why not? Because what you're doing now isn't working. The blind faith that you've put in Steve Keim is starting to wear really, really thin.
Oh, it's paper thin right now.
Right?
There is no trust right now. There is no every decision is going to be micromanaged going forward.
And you're losing your fan base.
Right.
You are losing your fan base. You were at the stadium last weekend.
Yeah.
They don't win at home.
Mike, including the Mexico City game, they are 1-6 at home right now.
They do not win at home.
1-6 in 2022.
And of all the people you could bring in, whatever I'm trying to say here, I think that's how you re-engage your fan base is if you get somebody like Sean Payton. And I'm not saying it's going to work. I'm not saying he's an automatic. I don't know. But you've got to have that kind of hire if you're Michael Bidwill. You have to say, what we were doing is not. Fans are right. You're not stupid. What you've seen is actually what you've seen. I'm not going to sit here and tell you something different. And like I said, I'm not necessarily advocating for Sean Payton,
Right.
but I don't see how you bring back Kingsbury or Keim. They both got to go. But if Steve Keim stays and is allowed to hire, this will be his 4th head coaching hire. General managers don't get to hire 4 coaches in the NFL.
You usually get 2. You get 2. You get 2 head coaches, and if it doesn't work, hey, we got to go in a different direction.
Right? You drafted 2 franchise quarterbacks. How quickly do we forget? We were talking about the what's his name? The name escapes me. Josh Rosen. And the coach that got fired after
Steve
1 year.
Wilkes.
Steve Wilkes. God, that was terrible. You
after 1 year,
both of them.
He
after
was willing
1
to
year.
make that mistake that time. But are you willing to admit that again? And Mike, when you start talking about who's his mentor, who's Michael Bidwill's mentor, it is Jerry Jones. And we know Jerry Jones to be a guy who's very, very hands-on in Dallas with the coaches, the operations. Everything goes through Jerry Jones. He's the general manager. He's everything for the Dallas Cowboys.
You were in the building, and I'm going to ask you a question. I didn't pre-clear this one, so you tell me. Does Michael Bidwell display Jerry Jones-type characteristics when it comes to that? Because he doesn't. You don't see a lot of Michael Bidwell out in front of the media. You don't see a lot like Michael Bidwell on Hard Knocks. There's a scene of him flying his plane somewhere. Or there's a scene of him in the background in the locker room after they beat the Rams. And they have a couple shots of him in his booth, with him and Keim together in the booth. Blake Shelton sitting with one point.
Right.
He's not out there a lot, But so I understand what you said. He learned from Jerry Jones.
Correct.
And probably politically, it's good for him to be aligned with Jerry Jones.
Correct.
Hello, Super Bowl coming back to Arizona.
Thank you.
But
very
on
much.
the other hand, he doesn't strike me as he doesn't have his own radio show. He doesn't get in the media and say, "Well, my quarterback this or whatever."
No, he's not that guy. But when you start talking about operations and how the organization is going to be run,
right.
I think he takes a lot of his cues from a Jerry Jones in how he runs his business. He may not be the personality that I want to talk and be in front of the camera, but when you start talking about how much control do I have over day-to-day operations, I think Michael Bidwill is every bit the type of owner that Jerry Jones is. And say what you want about Jerry Jones, it's had success in the past. We haven't seen it in recent history, but the fact is Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys have made a boatload of money, and they are always relevant. We are always ad nauseum talking about the Dallas Cowboys. So he's doing some things right.
Fair point. I don't know. Like I said, and the Sean Payton story is easy because I don't think it's a fluke that ESPN and CBS Sports have come out and said that Sean Payton's coming back and he's really interested in coming to a place like Arizona or like Los Angeles, the Chargers. And the reason being teams that have been underachieving recently and teams that have franchise quarterbacks in place.
Yeah.
And
speaks to ego. It speaks, Mike, didn't mean to cut you off right there.
No.
It just speaks to the idea of, one, he doesn't want to go to a reclamation project.
Right.
He wants to go to a ready-made winner. He feels like his influence on that organization is the missing ingredient. He can be the difference either here in Arizona or in Los Angeles with the Chargers if you were to just drop him in the middle of that organization and like, okay, here I am. You do this, you do this, you do this. You guys were not far off. I'm actually the missing link for you to have all the success that you've dreamt about.
Yeah. No, I think so. And the other thing I think is that Chargers, Cardinals, the expectations aren't very high. They aren't very high.
Yeah, I mean, even less with the Chargers because they share a stadium with the defending Super Bowl champions.
Yeah. No, fair point. And if last Sunday was the bowl game to see who Sean Payton gets to coach, the Cardinals won by losing, I guess. I don't know. Yeah.
It's an interesting way to think about that. I never thought about it that way.
Because the Chargers might mess around and do something here, although in the AFC they're a couple steps behind. I don't know. I don't know.
It'll be fairly interesting.
Whatever it is, I think they both got to go. Yeah. I think they both got to go. Cliff has been so disappointing. But again, the things that Steve Keim initially made his name for, trading to get
the Keim time signs,
the Keim time signing, Bringing in veterans at the right time in their career. Where is that now?
Yeah.
Where is that now? You completely misread the Rodney Hudson situation. And this offensive line, and the point made earlier about injuries is well taken. Injuries are a fact of life in the NFL.
Yeah. But for 80% of your offensive line, that's a lot to overcome, Mike.
It is a lot to overcome, but you have to have something better than what you have. But the other thing too is I think Steve Keim is in terms of decisions that are made. I think he played a heavy hand in putting the coaching staff together, and they've let two offensive coaches go in the middle of at the beginning of the season for one, and in the middle of the season for the other,
including the offensive line coach,
including their offensive line / run game coordinator.
That's a big one. And
what's been a problem? First down. At some point during the 49ers game, they were averaging a half a yard per attempt in the first down.
I think it was like 5 inches.
Yeah.
Somebody came with some ridiculous stat. I was like, oh my God, that's
Sean
that's
Kugler
really
gone,
bad.
playing grab ass in Mexico City.
Yeah.
But that's got to reflect on the general manager as well. And they didn't know their coach he was in Ohio or Indiana, the running back coach. Some kind of domestic violence charge.
Yeah.
He came back and was working, and somehow the media found out about it before the team did.
Yeah, it's not a good look.
It
doesn't look good.
If I'm Michael Bidwell and I completely appreciate and understand everything you're saying, you got to flush it. You got to flush it, and you got to go. And if the price for that is somebody like Sean Payton that wants complete control, give it to him, because what you've been doing ain't worked.
I agree, Mike. But when the ink is still wet on the contracts you gave both those guys.
Yeah.
That's a hard pill to swallow. Now you got to admit, okay, I was a little quick in giving them the extension that they just signed. And oh, by the way, what a great parting gift that both of these individuals get to go and do nothing.
Understand. And I think –
and you've got to pay assistant coaches, because Sean Payton is not going to retain this coaching staff.
No.
So it's not just the head coach.
They all gotta go.
You've got to replace the whole coaching staff. So that's even more millions.
They got to go. And I think the other thing that I think, and this is going to be interesting too, the decision to fire Cliff might be easy. Like, you just look at it and whatever. This is easy. The money part, set it aside for a second. But the decision.
Yep.
Michael Bidwell to fire Steve Keim.
That's personal.
That's personal.
It's personal.
Because Steve Keim
He's been around for a minute. He's been around for a minute.
And with the DUI situation, and we talked about this.
He survived the perp walk. He survived a lot of
If
things.
he didn't have that relationship with Michael Bidwell,
he'd have been gone.
He would have been gone. And so I think there's some blind loyalty going on there that is costing this franchise. I really do.
And Mike, look, it's a bad situation. And when your franchise quarterback goes on air and says what he says without any hesitation, no fear at all, it speaks to a much bigger and deeper problem that is not going to be fixed anytime soon.
Real quickly before we get out of here in this segment, B-Train, the Cardinals went back to Mexico City, and it brought back a lot of memories from when you and your teammates played the first ever international game in Mexico City.
Regular season.
A regular season game in Mexico City against the 49ers. I know you did an interview with ESPN. They did a kind of a look back to talk about that experience.
Yeah. Shout out to Josh Weinfuss.
Very well done.
Yep.
And great to see you and Fitz and others giving your thoughts on that game. It was better back when you guys played. And I'm not saying that because you're sitting here.
It was organic.
Thank you. It was organic. You know, this is like every other international game where
contrived.
It's I won't go contrived, but it's an NFL production. It's an NFL production.
Yeah.
But you know what you guys did, and I know the Cardinals in their podcast, they talked about the flag and what led to you guys. Robert Griffin ultimately with the flag, and you were a big part of that team. And then at the end of the game, we retweeted out the wonderful picture of you post game with the flag. Waving it at the crowd after you guys won that game.
Yeah, that was actually during the game. That was during the fourth quarter. I was already out.
All right, there you go. Well,
it was a great
that's
moment.
not happening in 2022 NFL.
No, that is not happening. And unfortunately, the circumstances were much different. The Cardinals were on the business end of that score, and that's the biggest part of it. When you win, you get to do things like that.
And that not even withstanding, because the Robert Griffin thing was in the beginning, but it just had a raw feel to it, a uncharted territory feel to it.
Oh, it was totally off the script.
Because we saw it in Hard Knocks and how even Out of the Tunnel now is coordinated, and probably they would have yanked the flag away from Robert Griffin if it was in 2022 instead of when you guys did it. I don't think they would have allowed it.
Yeah, I mean, and it was a much different time in Mexico City too.
Yeah.
There were a lot of different issues going on locally, and we were given all types of briefings about places we could and could not go. It was just a much different atmosphere, and I just think for this time around, it almost was a victim of our time.
Yeah.
Because it's not, you
guys set the bar high.
We set the bar high, and you had the exact same two teams.
Yeah.
You got to give it a little bit of a remix. You got to spin it a little bit, because when you try to run it back 17 years later, it's kind of like when you do a sequel to a movie all those years later.
That's
it's
a good point.
I mean, okay, we've Coming to America.
Yeah.
The second Coming to America, I mean, 30 years is like, nah, man. No, stop it, Eddie.
The starting at defensive end for the Cardinals, Bertrand Berry. What? Hold up. No, but if you wouldn't have known Mexico City, it could have been London, it could have been Berlin, and look, I give them credit on the one hand because they're printing money with these international games.
That's right.
And Roger Goodell was asked and didn't deny the fact that the possibility to put 4 teams over in Europe and call it a division.
The logistics, though.
The PA might have something to say about that. Like, hey, you got Berlin at Seattle this weekend.
Gosh.
Brought to you by Lufthansa. There's a lot of that, but the fact of the matter is they're not doing this for free, and it's part of that, and it just felt different. It just did. Speaking of which, though, Coach Kugler could have benefited from 2005 restrictions. Only go to the stadium and the hotel. We're going to watch you the whole time.
Yeah.
Maybe it would have saved himself.
Yeah,
hey, keep your hands to yourself.
And that's really unfortunate. I have a lot of respect for Coach Kugler. He was a guy that was very well respected and very highly thought of, and that situation just seems so out of character for him, and I just hate that for him, and unfortunately that there's very little to be done to come back from that. He's going to have to go back to trying to regain his good name around the NFL, and that's a very long, tedious process, Mike. That's not something that's going to happen anytime soon. I just hope that he's willing to put in the work to be able to do that, because he's a good man, he's a good coach, and up until that point, he had a lot of respect around the NFL.
And you know him, so we'll take that as the final word on the subject. All right, we'll step aside here. On the other side, college football.
Yeah.
So we're going to spend about 90% of that segment on Michigan, and then whatever else you guys want to talk about. That's coming up on Train and Gross.
Train and Gross.
I call my union rep, man. I'm trying to get a break here.
I mean, he does have a cup of Miss Tasties, and we're not letting him eat it. That's wrong.
That's unfair.
Trying to start segment 3 with some pretzels in my mouth. Hey, college football.
And then there were 4.
Championship weekend looms here around college football landscape. And a couple thoughts. And I was only half kidding about Michigan. Michigan is deep in it again this year.
Very impressive
probably
win.
a surprise to some people.
Very impressive win last weekend.
But I want to start, and I don't mean this. I know this is going to rub you a certain way, and I don't mean it this way, but USC is back.
Yes, they are.
And I think that's a good thing for college football.
It is.
You guys were Notre Dame, who was in it. That was good for college football.
Absolutely.
You need to have teams you love, but you also have to have those teams you hate.
Yes.
But those high-profile teams drive the product.
Yes.
You love the Lakers or you hate the Lakers.
Yep.
You love the Yankees, you hate the Yankees.
Yep.
You love USC or you hate USC.
Right.
But it's good for the product, and it's good for college football
when those
that
teams
USC
are
is relevant again.
And now we're waiting on Florida State to get their act together. We're waiting on a few other teams to get there. Nebraska, can they ever figure this out?
No. Well, I want to save Nebraska for later when we talk about college football changes.
I got you.
Because you can replay these press conferences over and over again.
I got you.
Go ahead.
So the thing that I think with USC represents the future of college football, because I look at Lincoln Riley, I look at Caleb Williams, I look at the star receiver from Pittsburgh. They are the direct product of the transfer portal. Mm-hmm. And I think the transfer portal is here to stay for college football. You can go anywhere you want to go. You can commit to a school and go in there and compete and fight. And if you don't like anything about that situation, you can leave and have no penalty anymore. They have done away with having to sit out a year and all this other kind of stuff. You can go and play right away. And USC is the poster child for transfer portal because you're talking about, I believe it was 24 different transfers that came along with Lincoln Riley. It's especially his quarterback that was here at Oklahoma, who is going to be the Heisman Trophy winner, Caleb Williams. You talk about the transfer receiver from Pitt, who may or may not be up for the Biletnikoff again. But the fact is, you were able to infuse all this talent, and from one year to the next, a team can look completely different.
Absolutely. Based
on how they're able to play their cards in that transfer portal.
We're going to talk coaching changes in a minute, but the transfer portal, Kenny Dillingham, the new head coach at ASU, said, we're sitting on the transfer portal. Like he's going to have somebody monitoring it 24/7.
You have to.
It's a fact of life in college football.
It is Mike. It is the way of the land as far as college football and recruits. You have to be able to find some guys that can come and help your team right away, almost like junior college used to be for major colleges.
So you look at the college football playoff rankings right now: 1, 2, 3, 4. It goes Georgia, Michigan, TCU, USC. We've talked a little bit about USC. Michigan and Georgia are kind of the opposite end of that, right? When you look at it, where you've got tenured coaching staffs, you're building programs from the bottom up, and they're solid. Like
sure.
Georgia's been nothing but impressive all year long as they're running their record to 12-0. Michigan 12-0, and Sean and I were talking about this. Michigan damn near lost to Illinois the week before they played Ohio State, partly in credit because Illinois is resurgent.
Trap game too.
Emotions. And then the second part of that is a trap game.
Yeah,
absolutely. But Michigan survived, and now they dominated Ohio State again, and particularly in that second half. You and I were talking about this, B-Train, before we started recording. At halftime, Michigan had rushed for a grand total of 11 yards.
That's fascinating. You told me that, and I could not believe that. Like, really?
Halftime stats, 11 yards. And fast forward to the end of that game, Michigan rushed for 252 yards. And Donovan Edwards, number 7, if you're keeping score at home, I think he kicked off his Heisman Trophy campaign for next year.
Yeah.
Sophomore for Michigan. He busted off a 65 and I think an 85-yard run against Ohio State in the second half, scored 2 touchdowns to help Michigan to that win. And nothing short of impressive there. But again, 11 yards in the first half to 200-plus yards in the second half. But you made a great point about Ohio State and how quickly the Ohio State faithful, the Ohio State media are turning on Coach Ryan Day.
Mike, Ohio State and Mike and Ryan Day was not here for all of them, but I believe they had run off like 8 straight against Michigan up until 2 years ago.
Most of them weren't even close.
And they weren't close. They were rolling Michigan out of the stadium, and to the point where 18 months ago, Jim Harbaugh was a guy that had his head on the guillotine, Mike. He was a guy that was about to get run out of Michigan because with all of the money that they had paid Jim Harbaugh and all of the things that he had tried to implement going to Europe and having the team travel, all of these things were starting to look like a joke and a farce because they were not winning the games that they needed to win, which was against Ohio State, which was against Michigan State, and not even playing for a Big Ten championship, let alone getting into the playoffs. Now you fast forward, he's got a potentially back-to-back Big Ten championships. He's going to have back-to-back playoff appearances, and it looks as if Jim Harbaugh has completely turned this thing around to where now he's probably going to get a pay raise because he also took a pay cut.
Yeah.
Right before last year, and now he looks like he is the standard. He and Kirby Smart are looking like the standard of college football, and what a difference 18 months make, Mike, because if you win the right games and you have good timing, your fortunes can turn at the drop of a dime. And isn't that kind of the idea of college football? You're talking about 17 to 22-year-olds. These at that age, you don't really know what you're going to get from year to year. These guys, they can have a season where they do everything right, and then you can follow it up with an absolute dud of a season based on emotions, based on what's going on in their personal lives. And I think for Coach Harbaugh to have done this in these 2 years, I think it's changed the perception of Coach Harbaugh. It kind of puts you back in the mindset of when he was at Stanford, how he was able to coach. And now here Michigan is, other than Georgia, really the cream of the crop.
And the fourth team in the mix, B-Train, TCU. They got no margin for error. A couple weeks ago, I think it was 2 weeks ago, they went in and barely beat Baylor. But it felt to me like when you saw the way they pulled that off, clock expiring, no timeout, run the field goal team. I think the kicker was coming out with like 10 seconds.
It's a fire drill.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Nailed it. That's almost like a sign. Like this was meant to be. Finished with a big win against Iowa State.
Yeah.
And now they play in the Big 12 championship game. But again, with no margin for error. Because you see people say, well, if Georgia loses, that resume. If Michigan loses, that resume.
Mm-hmm.
They're not saying that about TCU.
Or USC. And I think both TCU and USC have very losable games in their conference championship games. We already saw USC lose to Utah.
Absolutely.
And then you see with Kansas State, they really played TCU as tough as anybody this year. I mean, it's not like these are gimmies and they're just going to walk over. And I even go to Michigan. I know with Michigan in their game, they've been impressive all year, but it's not as if that game in the Big Ten championship is just going to be a coronation by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, and you said it when we were talking about Michigan, Illinois prior to Ohio State. What's the letdown after Ohio State? Because Purdue on paper is not a great football team.
Right.
But Purdue the football team, you know what kind of kids play football at Purdue.
Yep.
They're smart kids. They're engineers. They're engineer wannabes.
Yep.
And they work hard at everything.
No
so
doubt.
they're going to not give an inch in that game.
We saw this last year, Mike, when they were able to beat Ohio State for the first time last year. They went to the Big Ten championship and just rolled.
Beat the snot out of Iowa.
Beat the snot out of them. And I think for the Purdue Boilermakers, this may be a repeat. We don't know. And as we just talked about, when you got these 17 to 22-year-olds, you don't know which team is going to show up. Or are they going to be the team a lot like last year that was ready to carry that momentum into the Big Ten championship? Or are they going to have that letdown syndrome that you're talking about? I look at Michigan, and I don't think Jim Harbaugh is going to let them have a letdown. I think he's going to coach this week really hard, and he's going to allow them to go out there and handle that business.
Hypothetically, and we go back to what we were talking about a minute ago, 1 through 4 in the current standings all win their games.
Yeah.
And it stays stat,
It's
1
chalk.
through 4.
Yep.
I think that's good for college football because you have one team from the SEC because, again, like I was saying earlier, everybody loves to hate somebody.
But there's SEC fatigue. I've got SEC fatigue.
FCC fatigue. And look, Georgia's a fine standard bearer. They will represent their conference
There's
well.
no doubt about that.
You know, Michigan back-to-back, people aren't tired of Michigan yet. There's enough with the Jim Harbaugh stories and all
course.
that, right? And then new blood with TCU. And again, I think USC, to me, is the biggest addition to that.
Yes.
I don't know how they would stack up against Georgia the way the playoffs line up right now. But I want to see it.
Absolutely.
I want to see, and I'm not a USC fan, but I want to see USC in this playoffs.
Yeah.
The thing that's weird for me is if I'm a Pac-12 fan or if I'm in the Pac-12 market, it's a weird thing, right? Because finally you're like, hey, we got a Pac-12 team back in the playoffs.
But it's them.
But it's them.
Yeah.
It's those guys that are leaving.
The team that you love to hate.
If you're the other 10 teams, you want to see anybody but USC, but you get it. I guess UCLA is the second one. All right, real quickly before we get out of here, coaching changes. Before we talk about new coaches and new schools, I want to talk about a guy who stepped away surprisingly with his announcement at Stanford. David Shaw announces his
my favorite coach, Mike.
One of the
and I've talked about that.
Yeah, you've mentioned it, and I want to let you build on that. When you look at it, though, just one of those it's low key, but always good teams. Tough, not always the most talented teams, but just I think did the game right and did things the right way.
Yep. And I love David Shaw, and I love his approach to the game. I love the way that his players played. As you talked about his approach, he was a very physical coach. He wanted to have offensive line and defensive line really be at the forefront, have that skill position, that running back that could pretty much do everything. He had a long list of those guys, including, headed by Christian McCaffrey a few years ago. I just loved his approach, and I think he started to look at the lay of the land, Mike, and I think he just got tired. He's like, how can I compete with a USC, Mike, if they can come in and bring in basically a whole new team? You brought in 24 new guys, and to just get into Stanford alone is going to be a challenge. But then trying to get these upper echelon guys to not only buy into what he's doing, but then be able to actually get them into school, I think he's just looking at it and saying, hey, man, I give up. There's no way I can really compete. And that's such a shame because what he was able to do and how he was able to coach his teams, I think it was so important for the layout, for the look of college football.
And, a couple thoughts there. Like, I believe college football and the Pac-12 will be worse off for not having Coach Shaw. And he said, I'm not leaving to coach someplace else. I'm just stepping away.
Yeah.
Number one. And number two, the tie into ASU. You think about ASU's troubles. David Shaw was particularly critical of ASU during the COVID years and everything that came to light, and particularly critical of Herm Edwards, which is unique. The fact that he felt that strongly about the sport of the game and the conference to publicly criticize a peer. You don't see that a lot in college. You might see a dust up on the field where the handshake goes sideways or whatever, and then heat of the game, and they don't. But to go on the record and criticize a peer, and Herm Edwards, whatever else you want, he's still well respected,
absolutely,
elder statesman of the coaching fraternity. So that took a lot for David Shaw to come out and speak the way he did when that happened.
Yeah, I think when he talks, he's kind of like E.F. Hutton. When he talks, people listen because he's so well respected. He's such a well thought out individual. Everything that he says, it always sounds very well thought out. But I will disagree with him on this aspect. I think David Shaw, a lot like his predecessor, Jim Harbaugh, I think would do very well at the next level. He may not take another college coaching gig, but I think he would do very well in the pros. And I think if there is a pro team that's kind of looking for a change of scenery, I think he would be one of the perfect player or perfect guys to lead an organization because of his attention to details and his standard of excellence.
And this is going to come out the wrong way, maybe, how hard it was or how challenging it was to do it at Stanford as opposed to Georgia or Ohio State or fill in the blank, those types of schools that just pull in the talent.
And to follow a guy that was so successful there right before you.
Good point. All right, we're going to talk real quickly. 3 jobs in college football. 1 has not been filled. 2 have been filled. The one that has not been filled, Colorado. Deion Sanders to Colorado makes no sense to me.
No. He's too big for Colorado. Boulder is not big enough for Prime. His personality it right now is too much for Boulder, Colorado. They're not ready for prime time.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
And according to Prime, when he was on 60 Minutes, it's always about money.
Absolutely.
And I get it. But
where are you going to go, Mike? You can't recruit in state. Where is the talent? Where's the top notch talent?
You can't take transfers. The transfer portal you mentioned a moment ago, you can't do it at Colorado because of the academic requirements. And don't get me wrong, Colorado is not Stanford or Harvard or anything like that. They just have weird degree requirements to get kids in that transfer. Football players are not football players. I don't get it unless the only thing that I can think is Prime's the smartest dude in the room, and he's using this to leverage something else, whether it's the Jackson State situation and I think we all agreed when we talked about this previously, the only job in college football that's Prime should leave Jackson State for is Florida State.
Florida State.
So,
and right now their coach is doing pretty good right now. I don't think there's a real reason to fire him.
Your job is not done at Jackson State, as far as I can.
His job is not done, but Mike, if he runs the table and they go undefeated this year, I don't see what else he could do to lift the image of Jackson State. You could go and do it again, but I think you get to a point where, okay, yeah, you've done it again, but where does it go from here?
You know what I'll say to that is to continue to do what he's doing, and some of the coaches see it, some of it begrudgingly, lift the profile of that entire conference and
HBCU already done that, Mike.
But I think he continue and push it even further. And look, this is not solely his responsibility, but what can he accomplish? I think, take it further than he has already. That's all I'll say. And I'll say even weird, stupid stuff like TV.
Yep.
For the first time ever, a Phoenix TV station, a local Phoenix TV station, picked up the HBCU contract. So you'll turn on the TV and it's Southern against Florida A&M.
Absolutely, that's big. That's all because of Deion.
Yeah.
And you think about Eddie George and what he's doing, and there's so many guys that can get it done. I mean, I just look at it and say, hey, Deion, I think he can get much better. Like if he's just patient, he could do better. Because the thing that he keeps saying is it's not just about him, but it's assistants. The assistant coaches. Yeah. Those guys have got to get paid. They're not making anything at Jackson State. And he's got a NFL caliber coaching staff, and they deserve to get that payday.
100%. And I get it. And ultimately, that you talk about the transfer portal for kids and coaches go, and that's how this works. And, I'm just saying, and I think you agree, Colorado is not.
That's not the
All right, Nebraska. Matt Rule, named the head coach at Nebraska. He ain't Tom Osborne. And I get tired of the same old press conferences because whatever they said about Matt Rule, they were saying about Scott Frost when he came home.
And Scott Frost was an alum. But, I mean, Matt Rule, the money that they gave him, you would have thought that he was coming off of a playoff appearance. And For him to have lost his job in Carolina and to land solidly on his feet at Nebraska with that salary, it just speaks to what the going rate is for good coaches and what certain programs are willing to pay for coaches that they believe can uplift the profile of their program.
And Trev Alberts, man, like, I mentioned earlier, Steve Keim, how many coaches do you let him hire? Trev Alberts.
This is it.
He's got it. I'm surprised he survived this one.
He's an alum.
He's an alum, too.
Yep.
You brought back an alum.
Yeah.
You better get this one right.
Yeah.
And you look at where Nebraska football is, and and Michigan, Ohio State's not even fair. We look where Nebraska football is relative
in the Big Ten
to the East, to most of the teams in the East, and
nobody cares.
You're not even Illinois good anymore.
Nobody cares. Nobody cares about Nebraska right now. When we were, and if you were to go back to the 90s, if you were to go back 20, 25 years ago, that would be blasphemy to say nobody cares about Nebraska because they were in the mix every single year.
Yeah. All right, lastly, home. ASU. Finally, not finally. I mean, they let Herm go after Eastern Michigan, I believe. Mm-hmm. So there's been Sean Aguano, the interim. Yeah. I felt for Sean Aguano because it was I won't say it was a no-win situation, but it was a really tough spot for him to be in. And, there's no way they could have given him this job particularly. Maybe, I know the Coaches Association, we talked about this, sent the letter after the Devils had the nice upset win over Washington. But it didn't go well. The balance of the season. I think the only win after that.
And you lose to U of A? No,
yeah.
No.
And I think the only win down the stretch, keep me honest here, was against Colorado.
Right.
And everybody beats Colorado. That loss to Stanford, I think, sealed the fate. Yeah. And Kenny Dillingham, the offensive coordinator from Oregon, is
ASU alum.
He's an ASU alum. He's a local kid, played high school ball here, and said all the right things. And I'm not going to come out as hard on him as I did Nebraska. Mm-hmm. But I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, the sleeping giant phrase was uttered as part of this.
I wish they would leave that alone.
Right?
I really wish they would because, if you're asleep, then that means you're not doing anything.
Right.
And if you're asleep, you're not really a giant.
So
stop it.
So, look, he's saying the right things, and he's assembling. You talk about a coaching staff. He's assembling guys with Arizona ties, Arizona connections.
Speaking of Coach Aguano, he said he was going to keep
him. And I'm of two minds on that. On the one hand, anybody associated with ASU during the NCAA years, you could make a strong case, similar to what I said about the Cardinals, clean house. Let him go.
Let him go.
And like I said, it's not anything against Coach Aguano. I love the guy. Loved what he did at Chandler. Yeah. I mean, I'm more dialed into high school football in many respects, and nothing but respect for where that program's at.
But they're still going.
They are.
They're still going. Last I checked, they play Friday in a couple days. Yeah.
So you got to recruit Arizona.
Yeah.
But we've heard that forever.
Yeah.
So it's like if we were in Missouri, show me.
But but to be fair, there's a lot more reason now than when he was even head coach at Chandler to recruit Arizona. There's a lot more talent in Arizona.
Fair.
And if you look at the last 5 years, Mike, the last 5 to 10 years, the talent level has really risen in Arizona, and you're starting to see a lot of these programs play outside of Arizona to show that they actually belong on a national level as far as recognition and those type of things. And, of course, my son and Chandler and Hamilton, they've all tried to do things to increase the profile, but you still got to go get those local kids because they want to be here. They want to go to ASU. They want to go to U of A and represent good old-fashioned U.
And we're biased, right? I mean, we want to see the Arizona kids do well. And, no matter if you're an ASU fan or not, it's fun to cover a winner, right?
No doubt.
And we're not talking about bowl games. We're not talking about anything. Mm-hmm. We're talking about another new head coach. You and I were doing the radio show when Todd Graham was hired, and we know how that went.
I was the very first interview for Herm Edwards when he got the job.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember we got in trouble with ASU.
Oh,
and
with Coach
Todd Graham. Sean Crespin said, hey, don't ask him about Pittsburgh. I said, okay, I won't.
I did.
And then I asked him about that, and I think we got banned. Yeah, sorry.
Whatever. It's all good.
I don't listen to
water under the bridge.
I heard Todd Graham's going to come back and be the defensive coordinator for Dillingham. Is that true?
Is that right?
That's what I heard.
Left lane, hammer down?
I don't know. He's not. Speaking of guys that are available, I don't think he's in Hawaii anymore.
Yeah. I think that'd be weird. You were head coach once upon a time, and then you come back as a D coordinator, same school. I just feel like that's awkward.
Guys got to work, I guess.
Yeah, you got to work, but I mean, there's.
Well, hey, no, seriously.
300 schools.
Selfishly for me, and I won't speak for you on this one, but selfishly for me, I'd like to see this team and this coach turn it around and do what he says he's going to do.
Me too.
Because the Arizona kids will benefit from it, right? And I'm going to hate to say this, and it's going to sound like blasphemy. Take a page from the team down south.
Yeah.
You know, they figured it out. To your point about the 5 and 10 year thing, right? Because the previous coach in Tucson, he couldn't find Maricopa County with a map.
Well, they already hired ASU alums onto the staff, and day one, Dillingham and Iguano got on a Zoom call with over 100 local high school coaches.
That's great.
And said, what can we do? What has been missing in the past? How can we change that? And then they also pledged that the first 2 weeks of open recruiting, not a single ASU recruiter will leave the state of Arizona.
There you go. Got to do it. Can't be any worse than it's been.
No.
It can't be any worse.
Only go up from here.
3 wins this year. I think, Sean Cressman, keep me honest here, the worst season of
Most losses in school history in one season.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's bad stuff.
Wow.
And again, I'm a broken record, but I can't help myself. The NCAA is not done with them yet.
No.
You know, and I think that at some point that in and of itself is a crime.
That's a crock.
The NCAA needs to do something. You say it's going to be a slap on the wrist.
It's not going to be as bad as people think.
Other people say, oh, it might be worse. Whatever it is, the fact that they haven't said what the penalty is it will hurt this recruiting.
It still is
class.
hurting recruiting, and it's still hurting coaching searches and everything else. And it's a crock that it's taken 3 years. But I think because it's been so long, because we've got comps that have been passed down in terms of issues from the NCAA, and those weren't astronomical, and then the fact that every single coach, for the most part, has been
but the penalty
washed.
Whatever the penalty ends up being, it's already started by not knowing.
Oh, you've already been hit. Yeah, you've already dealt with it.
You had the worst recruiting class in the Pac-12 last year. You're going to have one of the worst recruiting classes in the Pac-12 this year. Ask Kevin Sumlin how it goes when you have back-to-back bottom recruiting classes. Doesn't go well. All right, we'll step aside here. The reason you really tune in, you've missed us, and what you've missed is Pump the Brakes, and especially you've missed dad jokes. Absolutely. That's coming up next on Training Grose.
Yeah.
Welcome back in. Final segment of the podcast, Training Grose. It's time for Pump the Brakes. This is the stuff we live for.
Is this where I step in? This is my time?
Let's hear it. Let's have it.
You guys know how this works. I'm going to give you statements from around the world of sports, little pop culture. You tell me if you're pumping the brakes on that statement. I got to turn up the right thing. It's been so long I forgot to turn up the right one over here. It's one of those. If you're pumping the brakes on it, or if you're riding with that statement. All right. Since 2015, what was this, 7 years ago? 49ers are 36-17 with him starting, and just 16-54 without him starting. The 49ers should just kiss and make up with Jimmy G and try to trade Trey Lance at this point. Pump the brakes or not?
No, I ain't pumping the brakes. Not at all.
B-Train?
Not at all.
No, I'm not going to pump the brakes.
Has one throw ever changed the trajectory of somebody's career so drastically as Jimmy G airmailing that deep post in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs? He hits that, we are not having any of these conversations because the team's winning.
And Trey Lance ain't a 49er.
Trey Lance is not a 49er.
Yeah.
Who knows where he is? Who knows where he is?
No, I can't argue that.
Let me throw these out there.
I can't argue that.
Can't argue that
When
at
I
all.
say this, understand I'm not comparing Jimmy G to these two quarterbacks, just simply the first 59 starts of their career.
Joe Montana and Steve Young?
Yes, Joe Montana was 37-22. Steve Young was 40-19. Jimmy G's first 59 starts, 40-19.
Are you really comparing Jimmy G to Steve Young and Joe Montana?
No, I'm not. But what I am saying is the team is winning, and if the team is winning, how can you continuously, if you're Shanahan, how can you continuously walk into that locker room at the start of each season and say, guys, we're moving on to some rookie who's proven nothing.
I need you to put on a game face and support
we're
him.
moving in another direction with the rookie that's proven nothing, guys, when we're ready to win a Super Bowl right now. How can you continuously do that?
I mean,
If they make a playoff run, and they're going to, by the way, if they make a playoff run this year, how in the hell do you look those veterans in the face the next season and say we're going with a rookie?
Because here's the thing. Well, he's not a rookie anymore. I mean,
He
he's a
won't
guy
be,
that it'll be his third year.
Sure.
So
An unproven third-year player.
Unproven third-year
Right,
player.
yeah.
Jordan Love's like, hey, hold my beer.
Right.
But when you start talking about, Jimmy G, the fact is you've got so many good players around him. They make him they kind of prop him up a little bit because
they do.
If you
100%.
if you look at some of the throws that Jimmy G makes, they're not necessarily right on the chest. They're
not
right on the hands.
Nope.
But you've got such tremendous athletes. They make him look good because they make these extraordinary
Hell yeah,
catches.
they do.
Then you go out and get a Christian McCaffrey to go along with a Deebo Samuel, to go along with the Brandon Ayuk, to go along with the George Kittles.
ASU.
I mean, my goodness, there is a lot of talent on that side of the ball, and we haven't even gotten to the defense with Nick Bosa and every
unbelievable.
I mean, look, there is no weakness when you talk about the San Francisco 49ers other than the quarterback position. So, yes, until Trey Lance gets healthy and is able to play a full season, you're going to be stuck with Jimmy G.
Hey, look, and it's the opposite of what we were talking about with the Arizona Cardinals. You talk about roster construction.
Oh, they are put together beautifully.
What John Lynch is doing?
Beautiful.
Maybe we send Steve Comm up to the Bay Area and do job shadowing.
My God.
Let him hang out and watch him. But yeah.
All right, number 2.
Yeah.
Russell Wilson
Ooh.
is destroying his personal legacy with the way this Broncos ride is going.
Ain't pumping
Broncos
the brakes
country,
on
let's
that.
ride.
Ain't
Let's
pumping
ride.
the brakes on that. It's a mess.
Not pumping the brakes.
And because I lived and worked in Denver for a bunch of years, I follow some
It's
people.
killing the way people view him.
I played in
Terribly.
Denver, so I know the expectations that they have in Denver. The thing about Russell Wilson is he figured that that the grass was greener. So he hemmed and hawed his way up out of Seattle. He realized that what he had in Seattle wasn't all that bad. And I think a lot of times when guys, high-profile guys, get that trade and they get what they asked for, sometimes they find out that it's not quite what they thought it was going to be. And I think for Russell Wilson, the fact that you don't have the wins to go with everything else, I think that makes his personality that much less likable. The less ride and I'm going up and down the aisles and working out.
Yeah.
Let me cook, but I'm going up and down the
high
aisles
knees on the plane,
while we're going overseas. Nobody cares about that.
Right.
You should never know about that. It comes off as cornball, and when you're not winning, you come off as real cornball.
Right.
And a lot of people have said the best thing that he has brought to Denver is Sierra,
That ain't wrong.
his wife.
Who's lying? Not you.
But I think this is a bigger problem, though. I think it's not Russell Wilson. I
it's
think
not.
it's Hackett.
All of
I
it.
think Hackett is
Yes.
one and done
Yes.
in Denver because he is a guy that was not ready for the job.
Yes.
He did not understand
You
the
know, it's not
assignment.
wrong. And that's why I didn't say Denver, the Russell Wilson's the issue in Denver. I said he's destroying this situation is destroying his personal legacy because the way people are viewing him. Like you're saying, like the whole cornball thing. If you put his name in Twitter and see what comes up, he's just getting destroyed on a national level. So
And you know who looks smart out of this is Pete Carroll.
he does. And look what he's doing with Geno.
And who looks better is Geno Smith. Geno looks like a godsend.
Yep.
Like he can't do any wrong in
Till
Seattle right now.
Until they run into them Raiders. Just saying.
Hey, it is what it
Broncos
is.
country, let's ride. Number 3, Andy Reid. Andy Reid will go down as the best offensive mind of all time. Not innovative mind like the Bill Walshes, but just the best overall offensive coach ever. Listen to this. The Chiefs were supposed to take a step back after Tyreek Hill left, yet they lead the league in points per game, yards per play, and third down conversion percentage. The only team to finish a season leading all 4, the 2001 Rams. And here's this Chiefs team doing that after losing their biggest playmaker. Andy Reid's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing to pump the brakes on. And the only caveat about that 2001 Rams is that they didn't finish. They didn't win. They lost to the Patriots that year. But point taken about the offensive efficiency, and there were a lot of questions that were answered, especially about Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid putting him in positions. I think it's easier to answer those questions when you have one of the best tight ends in NFL history.
That's true.
And when you have that safety blanket,
Yep.
I mean, Travis Kelce, he covers a lot of different scars. You know what I mean? So
No, I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to ask about the Andy Reid.
I hate that team. I hate everything.
you got to
about
respect them, though.
Yeah, that's what I hate the most about it.
I
Because
thought
you
you were going to
watch
ask
it.
about the State Farm commercial
You
where he's
watch
drawing
it.
the mustache on
Yeah,
his
that
Did you
too.
ever see a player get a mustache drawn on his face?
Never.
Maybe Bus 3.
Never.
No.
No,
so
God,
stupid. But speaking of the
three.
Chiefs, though, CBS sent something out today where they listed the strength of schedule remaining games.
Yeah.
By far and away, the Chiefs have the easiest schedule.
Oh yeah.
So they're going to be able to
It
set
wouldn't.
it up.
With them, it wouldn't even matter. Who
Baltimore
the hell?
is a close second because theirs is pretty cupcake too.
They are the next team on the list. Giants have the hardest, by the way.
Number 4.
Oh,
Your poor Lions. By the way, look legit right now. They're not a bad football team. Number 4. You will be glued to your pump the brakes or not. You will be glued to your TV on Saturday, not for college football conference championships, but for Team USA versus the Netherlands in the World Cup round of 16.
Pump the brakes.
No.
I will not be glued. I respect soccer. I don't have a lot of interest in watching it. To me, that's a lot of running for sometimes no points at all, no goals.
0.
I mean, look,
They call that nil.
Yeah,
And
I
It's
mean,
called nil on the pitch.
Then you go penalty kicks in order to find the score. Like, no, that doesn't do it for me. Like,
Yeah.
I need scoring. I need some sort of action. Just kicking that ball and running all day long for 90 minutes plus. Sometimes you get extra minutes.
No commercials though. I like that.
Extra time.
Extra time,
Extra time.
and you still don't have any points.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a no for me.
I got a text from a friend of mine at work. He said, this is after they beat Iran the other day. He said,
Yeah.
now all those soccer fans who've never, ever watched soccer before can breathe again.
Exactly. There was somebody who tweeted out like
USA.
there was somebody who tweeted out a GIF or a GIF, whatever you want to call it, of some dude like over celebrating, and he said, "Me after not watching a single second of soccer for 4 years, but whew, the USA
Yeah, you got to feel
the
good
win."
about beating Iran, though. I mean,
You got the win.
But you feel bad for those guys though, because what they got to go back to, it's not good.
No.
I just in general, I don't get the whole. Not even the. It's the world's game. Like it's Copa del Mundo. I get it, but I'm gonna say that's a hard no for me, dog. I'm not.
Yeah.
When you look now that legal gambling's legal in Arizona, the over under in these matches are 1.5.
Yeah, it's tough.
I'm going to give you guys a choice here: Thanksgiving pies or board games. What do you want to talk about?
I'll do Thanksgiving pies for
Thanksgiving
100,
pies?
please, Alex.
Okay, Thanksgiving pies. In a comprehensive poll on pies.
Yeah. You know how you love your polls.
Love my polls. The most hang on. The most loved Thanksgiving pies are pumpkin pies. Pump the brakes or not.
Pumpkin pie?
Best pie.
Oh, pump the brakes.
I agree.
Look, it's sweet potato and it's not even close. If you don't have sweet potato on your menu, I don't know what you're doing. It's one of those where I respect pumpkin pie for what it is.
Yep.
But I don't. If I had to choose between, and those pies look very similar. Sweet potato and pumpkin pie look almost identical.
They do.
Tastes
But
nothing alike.
Nothing alike. Give me sweet potato all day long.
I'm pumping the brakes on that as well. And I will say I enjoy me some sweet potato pie.
Who doesn't?
But it's got to be apple on Thanksgiving.
I agree with that. That's
be.
my call too. It's in the top 3. So their top 3 are pumpkin, pecan. Is it pecan or pecan? What do you guys?
Either way, tomato.
Or apple. Those are the top 3
Yeah.
in that order.
Yeah, shout out. I got to do this real quick. Shout out Lonnie Porter, longtime basketball coach at Regis University when I worked there. And his mother used to come to the games. Beautiful woman, Verdi Mae Porter. And she said, "Mike, you ever had sweet potato pie?" And I said, no, I've never had. And then next week, she bought in homemade sweet potato pie.
Delicious.
My word.
He said, "My."
Oh.
Hey, by the way, real quick, police in Oklahoma arrested a man on Saturday after a family game of Monopoly turned violent. Apparently, the dude pulled a gun on his stepfather and his stepsister. Nobody got shot, but the game got
Pulled a gun?
Yeah,
Hey.
pulled a gun out there. So I was going to say pump the brakes or not. Monopoly's way overrated. Why are you pulling a gun?
But my family plays Monopoly from time to time. And some of those nobody ever pulled a gun.
No.
But those games.
First of all, why do you have a gun on you playing Monopoly?
Playing Monopoly.
They got pretty heated, though.
Yeah,
Pretty heated game.
heated is one thing, but having a gun present.
How do you get
to play the
heated
gun?
playing Monopoly?
Oh, if they have houses on those properties
And you landing on it, or God forbid hotels,
and you ain't got no cash.
yeah. Game starts getting a little too real, doesn't it?
Think you cheated when you got the parking space money?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey.
The dice betrayed you. You know what
All
I
right,
mean?
This is the time of the podcast where Sean Crespin stands up.
I do?
Yeah, because you got to get ready to make an exit.
All right, that's right. So, time for B-Train's Dad Joke of the Week. Right now, again, if you were listening at the beginning of the podcast, and we think you were because you made it all the way to this point, my man was giggling before we started after he was putting together his joke. So I'm anticipating this one today. We're going to see what it's like. But there's always a grading structure to our Dad Joke of the Week. No matter what, you're going to get one of these. If it's a good dad joke, you're going to hear the laughter. If it's above and beyond, you're going to get the old standing O. However, there's that chance, and it has happened before, where it just doesn't land, and you get one of those. So, all right, lay it on us.
All right, here we go.
Here it is.
Why wouldn't a shrimp share his treasures?
Why wouldn't he share his treasure?
Because he was a little shellfish.
I like it.
I like
I
that.
see why he was giggling before
Yeah,
the
that was
show.
a good one. I like that.
Little shellfish.
It's a play on
Get
words.
it? Yeah, see? Okay,
Yo,
just making
play
sure
on
you
words.
got it.
Thank you so much.
That was good. That was good. That's a good way to bring us back.
It's like a double entendre.
Yeah, it is. Good way to bring us back.
Well, thanks for hanging in with us. Episode 89 in the books, and
Yeah.
we'll be back. We're not taking a break next week. We'll be back.
Coming back strong, baby.
Absolutely. So thanks for tuning in. Don't forget, follow us on Twitter at Train and Grose. We'll see you next time.
We'll holla.
Good to go.
Yeah. Yeah. All righty, dighty.